Hi friends, Jenny D here, and I admit that when I pitched this topic to my patrons as a possible tutorial, I was really hoping they wouldn't pick it. Even though I pattern probably 75% of my costumes myself, I am totally self-taught, and I'm not super confident in my patterning skills. But I decided that I wanted to share my methods anyway, even if they're flawed, because cosplay isn't about perfect craftsmanship, or at least it doesn't have to be. There are certainly some cosplayers who pride themselves on their technically proficient sewing, especially cosplayers who compete a lot. But for most people, they just want to learn to make things that fit them and that look nice. I just want you guys to know that you can pattern your own clothes. You don't have to be some sort of sewing expert to do that. So with that said, here are 3 different techniques that I use to create my own sewing patterns. In order to squeeze them all into one video, I'm going to do sort of a basic top-level overview, but if you want further information, I will include some links and some more resources in the description. One of the most accessible and straightforward methods of patterning is basically just copying a garment that already fits you. This won't work for every cosplay because some cosplay garments are really different from the kind of stuff that you have in your closet. But if you need to create a basic shirt or a pair of pants, this is a quick and easy way to make something that you know will fit you. First, find a garment that fits you well and is similar in style to the garment that you want to make. I love crop tops, and this video is a great excuse to make one, so I am going to use this crop top that I wear all the time. And just be aware of whether or not your reference garment is stretchy, especially if you aren't going to be sewing in a stretchy fabric. Now you need some paper or fabric to pattern on. My mom gave me this entire bolt of 1-inch Pellon True Grid, so I've been using that lately, but you can also use patterning paper, butcher paper, or even wrapping paper is a good substitute. Start by turning your reference garment inside out. This will help you get a clear view of the seams. Fold it in half and lay it out on your paper as flat as you can get it. Trace all the way around your garment. You may need to get creative if your garment doesn't lay flat that easily. You can always use a measuring tape or a ruler to help out where you can't directly trace. Then measure your seam allowance out from that line and draw a second line. I'm going to use 1/2 inch in this video, which is a pretty standard seam allowance, but you may want to use something bigger or smaller. Whatever you choose, decide now and stay consistent throughout your patterning. Label each piece so you don't forget what they are, and make sure to trace the front and back separately because they're usually slightly different shapes to account for boobs and butts and such things. If there's not supposed to be a center seam or a closure, mark where the fold should be. Any piece that's a separate piece, such as sleeves or a collar or a waistband, needs to be its own separate pattern piece. Also, if you want to make any changes to the pattern, such as adjusting the shape of the neckline, lengthening or shortening the sleeves, etc., now is the time to mark them. If you want to make sure these patterns are extra precise and even, you can use a combination of straight rulers and curved rulers to even out the lines and curves. This is called truing. Then you can cut them out. And here is the finished top. Whenever I need to make something that is shaped the same way as a garment that I already own, this is my go-to patterning method. It is so simple and so quick to execute. First things first, in order to use draping, you will need a dress form. I know that this is something that not everybody has access to. I have found mine to be one of the most game-changing sewing tools that I've ever gotten. So if you think you'll be doing a fair amount of patterning and you can afford it, I would highly recommend investing in one. Draping is basically just shaping fabric around a form in 3 dimensions and then transforming those shapes into flat pattern pieces. It's one of those things that I think you either take to or you don't. Some people find it really confusing and hard, and others find it to be really natural. Personally, I like to use draping for either really flowy garments like Keyleth's overdress, or really fitted garments with specific shapes like Officer Jenny's blouse. Today I'm going to show you how to drape a bodice because it's pretty straightforward and has a lot of uses. First, you need fabric. Pros mostly drape with muslin, but you can use any scrap fabric that you have lying around as long as it has similar stretch and weight to the fabric that you're going to create your final garment from. I like to use thrift store bed sheets for draping because they're really cheap for a lot of fabric, but today I'm just going to use some more of this True Grid. Cut out a rectangle that's a little bigger than what you think you'll need because it sucks to have to add extra fabric while draping. Start by pinning it to the center front of your dress form. You're going to work outward from this line. Make sure that wherever you pin the fabric, there's enough fabric to go over to the top of the shoulder and all the way around the sides of the dress form, as well as, of course, low enough to where you want the hem to be. Now, starting at the shoulder and working your way down the side and then ending with the bust dart, just pin the fabric so that it fits the form. If it isn't laying flat or meeting properly, adjust it as necessary until you're happy. Once you're satisfied, you need to mark anywhere that you have pinned it. So the side seam, the shoulder seam, the neckline, the armhole, and both sides of any darts. If you're doing anything crazy or creative with the pattern, like a cutout or an interesting neckline, you can draw it right onto the draping with a Sharpie. Once everything is marked, you can unpin it and then cut it out. Now all that's left is to transfer it onto paper. Some of your lines will be a little wonky because you were drawing them onto a 3D shape, so now is the time to even them out. You can eyeball it, but like I mentioned before, a ruler and a curved ruler will help. Don't forget to add a seam allowance. I don't know if this is something that anybody else does, but it's basically just me cheating at draping. I start with an existing garment, something that I am completely comfortable destroying, and then I just draw on it, pin it, and cut it until it looks like what I want. Then I turn that into a pattern. I used this method to create Ceres blouse and my Inquisitor's Skyhold blouse. For both of those, I started with a thrift store button-down that fit me. At Goodwill or ARC, I can usually get a shirt like this for about $5. Make sure it isn't made from a stretchy fabric. I put the shirt on my dress form and I start marking any modifications that I want to make. I'll show you what I did for my Skyhold blouse as an example. This top has a lot of piping, so the seams have to be in really specific places. Using a reference image, I use a Sharpie to draw on all the piped seams. Then I mark the collar and the hem. I'm only doing this on one side because I'm going to duplicate all of it over to the other side during patterning to make sure it's symmetrical. I take the button down off the dress form and cut on all of my Sharpie lines. It's a good idea to label the pieces if you think they might get mixed up. Then I lay them out onto the patterning paper and trace them. Finally, I add seam allowance. I like this method for structural garments that have a lot of weird lines, decorative seams, cutouts, stuff like that, because it allows me to not have to worry about fit and to just draw straight onto the garment to figure out where things need to sit. It's also a pretty quick method of patterning because you're letting the thrift store garment do a lot of the heavy lifting here. Each of these methods are suited to certain kinds of garments, and I change up what methods I'm using based on the costume and my resources and sometimes just my own patience level. The first time you create a new pattern, it's a good idea to make a mock-up with it to make sure that it fits properly. I know it's annoying, I hate making mock-ups as much as the next person, but it can save you a lot of time and trouble in the long run. Also, you can use these kind of methods to create what's known in the design industry as a pattern block, which is just a basic template that's already been fitted that you can work from for future patterns. For example, if you have a pattern block for a long-sleeved, high-necked blouse that you've already fitted to your own measurements, you can easily adapt that into a 3/4 sleeved or short sleeve blouse, or a blouse with a scoop neck, or a V-neck, etc., without having to go through the trouble of patterning and fitting from scratch. I'm slowly building up a library of my own patterns that I can work from when I need to make really common garments, like a Renaissance-y shirt or a circle skirt. I'm not by any means saying that these are the right ways to pattern costumes. However, I pattern most of my work this way, and it's given me a lot more freedom to create costumes that fit me well, even when I can't find a commercial pattern to suit. Hopefully this takes some of the fear out of designing your own patterns. And as with any skill, you can't get better at it without first being willing to be bad at it. So start experimenting, learn from your mistakes, and help future you be the kind of cosplayer who patterns their own costumes. Good luck. Thanks to my patrons for making this tutorial possible. If you want to help me make more like this, and if you want to be able to vote in polls about what tutorials I make next, please consider pledging to my Patreon. I'll put the link in the thing. Okay, great. Cool.